Sorry, I was kind of zoning out there.
Hey guys, we got Tom Durphy on the call today. Tom, thanks for joining us. Real estate attorney. You've been like an attorney for what? Like, I was gonna say 20 some years. Is that accurate or how?
Yeah, 22 years at this point.
22 years. That's a long time to be attorneying, and helping out a ton of clients here in the St. Louis area. And your specialty is real estate. Is that accurate?
That's right. Yeah, that's the bar, the Missouri bar doesn't like us to use the word specialty unless we're a patent lawyer. But yeah, so the area of practice that I do a lot of work in is real estate.
Awesome. Well, thank you for joining us on our call today. It's going to be a lot of fun. You know, and I've talked to a lot of real estate agents or real estate attorneys over the years, and you know, from my experience, you just talk like a normal person. A lot of real estate attorneys kind of like, I can't understand what they're saying. So I appreciate that about you, Tom.
Well, hopefully I can continue that as we go along.
I'm optimistic. And let's make sure that we have your contact information either in the chat or something else. Can you put that in there? Or do you want Rachel to throw
Sure.
that?
Nope, I can do it. That's fine.
Awesome. So if anybody wants to reach out to Tom after the call or on another day, feel free to reach out at any time. So let's just get started. On the call today, we're going to talk to Tom about real estate questions that you need to talk to an attorney about. I got a couple questions, and I know Joe Wolf does here, but if anybody has any questions, just jump in or raise your hand or throw it in the chat, and any of the above will work. But Joe, let's get started with you. I know you, I'll get it started and you feel free to jump in at any time here. But and this is I'm going to say a somewhat common occurrence. But Joe bought a house he's going to rehab and resell in Florissant. And he hired some contractors. One of them in particular was a plumber. And Joe made the mistake that a lot of people make, and he paid the plumber in full when he was like half done. And after the fact, he kind of finds out that a lot of the stuff that he did do wasn't done correctly. And he never pulled any permits on stuff that should have had permits pulled on it. So feel free to fill in any of the blanks I have there, Joe. And not only that, the guy is now ghosting him and has been for like the last month or so. But what did I miss there, Joe? Anything else to add to that? Oop, you're muted.
Thank you. You can hear me now?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, yeah. So basically, I hired him to do the plumbing and the electric. And since I'm doing a retail sale on this, you know, obviously St. Louis County requires permits, but, you know, depending on the scope of the work, you know, on all the rentals I had, there were times when I would not get permits because if it was something very small, I'm not going to get a permit to do it. I'm just going to do it. And again, you know, obviously I would want or require the contractor to do it per code. So anyway, he did the electric, and he pulled the permit. The inspection was done for the rough in, and again, there's a final, right? And the same thing on plumbing. He started on the plumbing, got it all in, and it was at the point where he needed to do the rough in inspection for the plumbing, and he said, "Hey, can you pay me?" And I'll be honest with you, I guess, you know, I've been doing rentals since about 2005 or so, and I you know, I guess bad habit. I never had a problem with, you know, at least the guys I work with is that, hey, I need it. And, you know, some of these guys are really small, right? So paying them. So it's like, and again, he gave me 3 references. I called all 3 and I got a hold of them, 2 of them, and 2 of them were, you know, fairly, you know, yeah, he did a good job for me. The one wasn't crazy about some of the drywall work that he'd done for her, but I'm like, hey, well, he's not doing drywall work for me.
Right.
So anyway, paid him, and then all of a sudden, just nothing. And then he just just really belligerent attitude. And so just to further add detail. So like I said, I have an email chain with him that shows, hey, this is what I want. I want plumbing and electric, and I want inspections on everything, right? And he said, yes, that's what I'll do. And the price was $7,500, about $2,500 for the plumbing, for the electric, about $5,000 for the plumbing. So anyways, like I said, he literally got all the electric done and through the rough-in inspection, got all the plumbing done and was ready for the rough-in. And again, he's like, hey, could you pay me now? I'm like, oh, okay, sure. Because like I said, at that point, it was somewhat of a formality, right? In terms of, but so anyway, now the other thing is, so I have an email that says, yes, electric, plumbing, and inspected. Okay. Now in the contract I signed, it just says perform electrical work, perform plumbing work. Okay. So obviously it doesn't say yes or no to inspections, right?
Yeah.
Now I do have email chains, text chains where I said, hey, what's going on with the electric? He's like, yeah, it'll be done here. It'll get done. So, and same thing on the plumbing. Hey, and again, he indicated, yes, the inspections will be done. So again, I don't know in the legal term, was it just strictly the contract? Because again, the contract doesn't say do them. It does not say do not do them, right? Okay. However, I have correspondence, the email correspondence, which was prior to signing the contract, that says work plus inspections, right? And then again, I also have text messages where it said, well, when will the inspections be? And he indicates inspections next week. Okay. Yep. So I don't know what to do or where to legally I stand.
A couple of things come to mind. So I will give you ask you a question and give you the kind of legal term of art for what I'm looking for. Does the contract that you signed contain what's called an integration clause? And that's a clause that says this agreement represents the entirety of the agreements that we have. Any verbal discussions that we have, any outside discussions, they don't matter because everything that we've talked about is in this agreement. So, okay. or is it just a typical kind of contractor bid that says this is what I'm going to do?
It was a standard contract. I don't remember that language being in there because, like I said, I took a couple of minutes and I did try to make sure I looked at each paragraph or whatever, but I don't recall anything regarding that in there. But obviously I can look again. So
the integration clause is the thing that would tell you whether those texts and emails that you have can make a difference. The other piece of it is it could be if the contract is ambiguous, then that can help bring in those things. The other piece of it is with the amount that's involved, whether or not it makes it cost effective to get somebody like me involved, because while $5,000 or whatever is a lot of money, if I'm litigating at $300 an hour, you can
10 hours later.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's a real, that's a real thing. And Joe, if you would want to send me in the chat, by a direct message, the name of the contractor. You guys all may be familiar already, but if not, I mean, one of the things that I do, and was one of the first things that came to mind as you were talking, was what's the name of the contractor? And I'm going to look them up on CaseNet.
Yeah.
And if you don't know CaseNet,
yes, I know what that is. Yeah, obviously, same thing for tenants, right? We use that for tenants, right?
Yeah. And so if those of you on the call are not familiar with CaseNet, I would suggest that you become familiar with it, because politics aside, there aren't a ton of things that Missouri government does well. I will say that CaseNet is one of them. It really is a robust system that shows what's happening with various lawsuits. And I'll put the link for CaseNet
I think Rachel already did
in the chat. Oh, he did. Okay, great,
Yeah.
great.
Yep. I've caught tenants. I've caught prospective tenants before saying, "Well, wait a minute, what about this eviction?"
But it's
Yeah.
but that's something, and if the plumber is an LLC, then I start to wonder about, well, do they need the money from you to be able to pay for, another job that they're behind on? And, is this something where it's going to be a problem, even if you get a judgment, in trying to collect from them? So I would say, either paying upon completion of the work or progress payments, where you're not investing more than what they've already done at any one time.
Yep,
those are both really good ways.
Lesson learned.
Yeah, right. And so one of my law school professors eventually became the Chief Justice of the Missouri Supreme Court, and he would refer to those types of things as tuition in the school of life. And I will use that. I will use that with my clients or potential clients, because it may just be one of those things where you're like, yeah, I'm not going to do that again. And, it's better than paying me a bunch of money to, maybe not get a better result than where you are right now.
Yeah. What about something like small claims court? Would that?
Yeah, that's
be...
actually, and let me ask you this: did you pay?
And
him
not
by
that I would.
No, but
yes, I paid
you
with
pay
check.
him?
Yes.
Did you?
Yes, sir.
Because here's another thing. I would say, because the limit in small claims court is $5,000, and
Okay.
and all of those texts and things that you have, if you organize those, judges are very interested in that sort of thing. If you take 15 minutes to present your case to the judge and you get a judgment, you can do a garnishment of the bank account, and you can find out the bank information by ordering your canceled check and finding out who endorsed the check. And you could put a garnishment on there. It might be worth I think it's like $40 at this point in order to get them served and whatnot. And then your time to go in front of a judge might be worth it.
And I don't know that I would, but it'd just be nice to, like I said, to understand what my options are. And again, I had the same thing, attorney friend who's not specifically real estate. He's like, Joe, it's not worth it, because like I said, just my time is I'll burn through $5,000. But anyway, so.
Yeah, John. Yeah, John asks a good question. You're absolutely right. He could. He asked if the contractor could switch bank accounts, and he certainly could. But what I'll say, and I'll turn this around for you guys, is how easy would it be for you to switch bank accounts? That's a hassle.
Yeah, everything's intertwined. So
if he doesn't think that anybody is going to do anything, then he might not. And I will tell you, I am not a vindictive person, but it is one of the more fun things when you're going after someone who's taken money from you, when you get a garnishment on their account and you're taking basically all or most of your money back, and then they're calling you and saying, hey, can we work something out? You know, the time to do that was a while back. So yeah.
I really
Okay.
like the idea of you taking him to small claims court, Joe. I think it's a
Yeah,
good-
yeah. Mhm. Yeah, his
because
name was Victor Mim, and I do not recommend using him. And I don't recall the name. He does have a company. So, but yeah, I'll send you that information. Like I said, you can. As a matter of fact, I thought about going to the BBB site and seeing if he's there. But
yeah,
I haven't done it yet, so.
that's another option. If he's, you know, if he's participating, that's absolutely
Mhm.
another option.
Mhm.
I think the other point, Joe, when I think about it, is we've had a few bad contractors hurt multiple of our borrowers. And I think
Yeah,
that
yeah.
people just think like, well, like I don't know. And at some point they're continuously hurting people, which isn't great.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Mhm.
I think there is something to be said about, if it is worth your time and worth your while.
Yeah, yeah. Mhm.
Maybe
Yep.
it makes them think about not doing that again.
Yeah, yeah.
Someone else.
And the other thing is, I want to focus and get this property finished. And my first thought would be, I really don't want to take any of these actions until I sell the property, because at that point he can't come back as a contractor and try and charge me something, right? Put
Right.
a lien on it for some imaginary thing. So, anyway, so again, I probably won't at least explore it further until then, which hopefully will be about a month or so away, but
Yeah,
we'll see.
yeah.
So
No, the timing makes sense. And, under a situation like that, you've got 5 years essentially for what amounts to a breach of contract. So you've got plenty of time.
yeah, yeah. The gentleman who did the plumbing was a very nice person, and again, same thing when he was doing stuff and I was there, he'd ask me and we'd say, oh yeah, I think you want to do it this way, or, and sometimes it was like, yeah, I need to talk to them if we're going to, or Vic, if we're going to do it. And I was like, yeah, that's fine. This is just my input, right? Same thing with the electrical guy. They did very nice work. It was very professional, but unfortunately the plumbing stuff, virtually none of it was to code. So I'm almost wondering if he was really ever actually planning on getting it inspected. So
Joe, well, thanks for bringing up the topic. I appreciate
sure,
it. Hopefully, you get a good result on that in the end.
yeah.
I'm just going to ask a couple questions, but feel free to jump in, anybody. If you got, just throw something in the chat or raise your hand or just speak up. Tom, I think one of the things that a lot of people always ask me about is, on my first flip or on my first rental, do I need to put together an LLC, or can I just do that in my personal name? What do you recommend when people ask you that?
So I think it really depends on what your plans are. If your plan is to do more than one and to do this over the course of time, I think setting up an LLC makes sense. It provides liability protection, provided, and Brian and I had talked about this a week or two ago. The thing that gives you the liability protection is not what you file with the Secretary of State, but it's actually having an operating agreement, which doesn't get filed with the Secretary of State, but it essentially says what you're authorized to do and how you run the LLC as a business. And so having an LLC to provide a layer of liability protection makes sense. And what I'll tell you too is in either case, whether you do it in your own name or you do it in the name of your LLC, know a good insurance broker. Know somebody who can help you get the appropriate business and liability coverage for what you're doing, because the liability protection is part of it, and that's good. And I'm always gonna come back to kind of the worst scenario possible. But if you don't have that insurance, you'll have the liability protection potentially, but you'll end up if there's a lawsuit over something, again, you'll end up paying me at $300 an hour to defend a lawsuit. And while that's a good business proposition for me, you won't like getting those bills month after month for litigation. And so, in either event, whether you're doing it by yourself, in your own name, or you're doing it under the LLC, the insurance is really key to making sure that you're protected and those defense costs are covered, because that's, judgment is one thing, and you want to avoid that and have protection for that. But even if you're successful, but you've had to pay $50,000 to defend a case, that's more than tuition in the school of life. And if you can you want to definitely avoid that.
Yeah. Well, before we got started here, Suzanne and I were talking, and you want to talk about your serial LLC question? We get a lot of questions about serial LLCs. So
Yeah, I feel like we have tons of people who are like, oh, we're going to do serial LLCs because they believe it's going to protect themselves better. And they buy every property in their serial LLC individually. What are the pros and cons of serial LLCs?
So the serial LLC makes it a little bit easier in terms of just kind of replicating the process. So that's one thing. And from a technical standpoint, it's probably best to have each property in its own individual LLC. I tend to ask people kind of what their risk tolerance is, and again, depending on how many properties you may have, if you're doing rentals, whether you might put a few properties into one LLC and just recognize that if the worst happens and someone takes a fall and is paralyzed and ends up getting this really large judgment, that then all of those properties that are in the LLC, subject to any mortgage that you might have, those are all going to be assets that a plaintiff's attorney could go after. So, what having that serial LLC does is that it limits what the exposure is in the event that there's any real significant issue of liability. But that also creates accounting issues, because then, and my guess is that those people who talk about doing serial LLCs do not have a separate bank account for each of those properties. And so in that way, that having them all in one bank account kind of runs counter to the serial LLC. So I think it's fine. I think that ends up creating more work than really is necessary. But that's just my view of it. And I think you could accomplish something similar if you've got if you're having rents on multiple properties paid to a property manager, and then the property manager remits the net amount to you. Then it becomes an accounting function of, okay, well, these rents go with this property, these expenses go with this property, and it can be handled from an accounting function as opposed to each individual silo, if that makes sense.
So if I get people ask me relatively often, do you recommend serial LLCs? And I was trying to glean from your answer, should I sell them? Yes or no? And I'm gonna
I mean, from my standpoint, I would say no.
Okay.
There may be other attorneys who have a differing viewpoint. I try and look at what's kind of the net benefit versus the cost or the aggravation to it. And I don't know that the benefit outweighs the cost and the aggravation regarding all of the administration that goes along with the serial LLCs, as opposed to keeping 5 properties in one LLC and then maybe creating a second one after that, and just kind of managing your risk that way. And then again, I'll come back to the insurance, that you want to make sure that you're appropriately insured, whether you're doing a serial LLC or you're having fewer LLCs. Make sure that you've got the appropriate insurance coverage.
Yeah. Yeah, and Tyler put in the chat another reason to cash out refi. I guess if you just don't have any equity in your LLCs, there's nothing to go after for somebody in a lawsuit.
That's absolutely true. And the other piece with LLCs or any kind of corporate entity is, from a legal standpoint, they are like a separate person. And you have to treat them as such. So if it's an LLC and you have a bank account, you're accounting for things appropriately. Sorry, that's my roommate. You're accounting for things appropriately, then you can't treat the rent or whatever comes in as your own piggy bank. You need to do distributions according to the operating agreement, and observe what are called the corporate formalities. You need to pay attention to those, because then if you don't and there's an issue, then a plaintiff's lawyer may attempt to go after you individually and say, you weren't really treating the LLC like a separate entity or like a separate person. It was really just you, and you were just kind of using this as a shell. And there may or may not be successful, but the thing that helps ensure that it will be successful is that you treat the LLC like the separate entity that it is. And your accountants can help with that as well, in terms of how you have them set up.
Very nice.
I feel like,
Go ahead.
I had a question.
ahead.
So you said something there about going back to your operating agreement and seeing how it functions. And I think a lot of people, or at least I personally review a lot of operating agreements that are like online and, someone paid $50 or whatever. I feel like it might be helpful for people to hear what are the benefits of going to an actual attorney to write your operating agreement. What does that give you versus finding some cheap random one online? And if they have a cheap random one online, how can they actually get a beneficial operating agreement?
And what I'll say is, it's possible that one that you found online may be beneficial. The thing that I would point out is that you may not know that it's beneficial, or you may not know that it's not. whereas I have the advantage of being able to look at it and know, am I, is this something that's effective? And so, what I would say, I guess the best thing I can tell you is it's probably 24 years ago, I took a trust and estates class, dealing with estates. And so I have somewhere in the recesses of my mind all of the language that that is involved in creating a trust. I am not going to go on to LegalZoom and create my own trust because I have partners that do that every day. And so, I would just, that's my biggest caution about going online, whether it's finding a form, that's available on Google, or you're going to some form website, is that you may not know you may not like with Joe's situation, you may not know what the term of art is that you're looking for, and yet you're clicking on a box that says, oh yeah, I want to include that.
Yeah.
And so that's where I can look at an existing operating agreement and say, yeah, I think this will do what it needs you to do, or I can create a single member LLC if that's what you are, and we can talk about and work with your accountant to figure out, does it make sense to treat your LLC as what's called a disregarded entity for tax purposes, which basically means that all of the income and expenses flow through to your personal return, and you just file a schedule on your return? Or does it make sense to treat it as an S corporation, and there are certain benefits that can go along with that? Those are probably the biggest things, is that I have an idea what may make sense for you, and what may work, where you may very well be guessing. And so I can hopefully provide, or another attorney can provide some peace of mind for you that what you're doing will provide what it is that you want it to do. Emily asked a question about what's involved in changing the operating agreement that you already used. That's a good question, and essentially you can make amendments to it. In most cases, you can make amendments to it. So there's a process. You'd want to, if you're the sole member, you just want to have a resolution that says, yeah, I want to amend the operating agreement to do X, Y, and Z. And then we would draft an amendment that says these are some additional things that you're allowed to do, or whatever the case may be.
So,
and then, sorry, Jay asked a question about any issues transferring a property from one LLC to another. That can get into some tax issues, and whether or not you're transferring it for value, or whether it's just a transfer without consideration. And so I would say, if you're talking about transferring after consulting with a lawyer, because there could be some implications that you want to check out before you do it.
generally, would you just transfer using a quitclaim deed, or how would you?
Yeah, I mean, that's, yeah, so the transfer itself is easy. Quitclaim deed is definitely fine. The issue is whether there are any tax implications if you're not doing it as a basically a sale for market value, because here again, you're transferring between two separate entities. And so that can result in some tax implications that that you may want to look at in your particular situation.
Very good. Let's move on to a different topic.
Sure.
So quiet title suits. I'm going to start with a lot of newer real estate investors or experienced real estate investors hear about buying properties at the county tax sale.
Yeah.
And then they kind of go down that road a little bit. Are you very familiar with buying properties at the tax sale? And then
I am familiar with buying properties at the tax sale, both in the county and in St. Louis City as well, which kind of has its own, St. Louis County, there's a separate statute and there's a savings provision, which gives people basically a year to potentially redeem the property after you send them notice. The city, when you buy a property, you buy it, there is no redemption period, but there's a very specific process that you need to go through in order to make sure that the property is yours and you have the appropriate deed.
And is that a quiet title suit, or is what exactly is that?
Yeah, so the city process is not, I mean, it's a species of quiet title suit, but it's more a confirmation of the sale by this specific process that they've laid out, and it requires an appraisal and the appraiser to basically say that you've bought it for the appropriate value. In the county, it would be a quiet title suit, and what I'll tell you is that that when it comes to those particular types of quiet title suits, the tax title suits, I actually refer those to someone because he's got a process down and he knows very well what he's doing, and his name is Dale Sweet. And if you buy properties at tax sales, Dale is someone that you want to get to know. Because it's there are things that I can do and that I know how to do that might take me a little bit longer, whereas this is he's got a website and I forget exactly what it is, but it's almost like the tax sale attorney type of thing. And
MissouriTaxSales.com.
Yeah. And so thank you. That's probably the best thing that I can tell you. If you are buying properties at a tax sale, Dale is absolutely the person to know, because he's got a He's got a great process, and it will be done correctly. It will be done efficiently, and you will be given good information as far as that goes.
That makes sense. Dave threw a question in the chat there. Should we answer his question real quick?
Sure. Yeah. Let's see. So if a real estate agent shows your home and the potential buyer slips and falls in your home and is injured, who's responsible for the injuries? Would the liability fall on the homeowner insurance company, or would the liability be on the real estate company's insurance? It's likely going to be the homeowner, because they've, unless the real estate agent did something to set up a dangerous condition, then the liability is likely going to fall with the homeowner. That doesn't mean that a plaintiff's attorney wouldn't sue both the homeowner and the real estate agent. But I think that the case against the real estate agent, unless there's something specific, I think it's going to be a harder case to make. So if you're doing a flip, and the home is in your LLC and the agent is showing the house, it's likely going to fall back to your LLC as the property.
Yeah, I asked that just because I sold my first house recently, and they wanted to do some walkthroughs and things like that. We still had, we hadn't vacated the premises yet, and the company I used I wasn't too familiar with, and I wanted to vet them, so they were sending just a arbitrary real estate agent by, and their client. When I asked some names of the client or the real estate agent, they got real kind of sketchy with me because they didn't want me to know who was doing what, and I don't know, it just made me feel real weird that I had a couple of strangers walking through the house, and that if something were to happen, I wouldn't have any. I would incur all the liability. So it was a little bit of a weird feeling.
Yeah. No, I think it's something, and and you more experienced investors with showing homes may have some experience with that. But I think that if you're opening the house up for sale, you're likely to have people coming through, and if you've got a box out for people to be able to use the key and go through, that's just something that's likely going to be a risk that you may have to take.
That sounds like that'd be a lucrative career for a scam artist, to just go tour some houses and have a slip and fall on a marble floor or something like that. So
well, and so what I'll tell you with that is, before I went to law school, I worked for Safeco Insurance Company, and I handled different commercial losses, and we had some fraud classes, and one of them was with somebody that the FBI had like a plea agreement with. This guy was going around and educating insurance adjusters and other people with an interest. And that included people that were like willing to break their nose in a fall, and that's the sort of thing, if people are willing to do that, it's kind of hard to guard against those kind of people. I think making sure that your property is secure for the day-to-day things, for the people walking through, and that you don't have dangerous conditions that might lead to that. That's the best thing that you can do. If somebody is going to go to that length, you're kind of looking for the unicorn, And I don't know that that's necessarily practical,
Yeah, yeah.
because from my experience, I'm sure those things happen. I mean, just somebody going through a house and
Yeah.
tripping and falling, I'm sure those
Yeah,
things
yeah, yeah.
happen, but I think those are fewer and farther between than
Yeah.
what happens.
It was just an eye-opening opportunity that you hire a company to perform a service for you, and you still are going to incur all the liability. I think
Yeah.
if I will hire another real estate agent going forward, I would probably sign a contract saying that, hey, you bring your clients in, maybe the liability falls on you if something happens. So I don't know if
Good
that's
luck with
possible
that.
now, but
I would say
Hey,
good luck with that.
I wanted.
I would be surprised. They might go for a mutual indemnification.
Yeah, right.
That if they're responsible, they'll indemnify you. But my experience in negotiating contracts says that they would probably say, and this is another legal term, and you're welcome to use it. It's my favorite legal term.
Okay.
They may tell you to go pound sand.
Or kick rocks, one of the two.
Hey,
yeah.
So
I appreciate your answer. So
yeah,
thank you very much.
Yeah,
hey, I just wanted to say one thing about the guy that got the shaft from the plumber or the contractor. So I had the same thing happen. I hired a guy to put a motor in my car. I paid him all the money up front. He skipped town. So I had to actually go through the litigation of getting my money back from a gentleman like you talked about. So I did the small claims court. I originally hired a lawyer, and it cost me a little bit of money. Went to small claims court. Well, after I won the agreement, the guy filed I think it's called a trial de novo. So basically,
asked for an appeal.
So then I had to go back a second time. The first lawyer, he told me, hey, the judge doesn't really like me, so you're going to have to do all the talking. So when I went back the second time, I decided to just go without a lawyer. So I won the second judgment, and to my surprise, when you win a judgment in court, they don't just give you a check. I then had to find a collection agency that would take on my claim to go after this person. And I luckily I found the right person, like about my second or third phone call. And the guy was able to do what you said, where he was able to find the guy's bank account and then freeze his assets. But it only worked because this gentleman and his wife both had all their money going into a bank account. So they had, quite a bit of finances in there. So the collection agency was able to garnish the bank account, close it down. So they weren't able to pay any of their bills and access their funds unless they paid me. So the guy had to do a cash advance or something on a credit card and pay me what I was owed plus interest, because when you win in court, you get interest on it whatnot. So that paid for the collection agent, but it was a big hassle, and there was a lot to it. It took like 3 years for when I finally got paid. So in the end, I did work with another contractor, and the guy had a good good arrangement where he said, you pay me 25% down, I can buy materials, 25% when I show up the day of work, and then 50% when the job's finished. And I found that goes really well, other than paying a guy, 50% down, and then he doesn't show back up, or you give him all the money before the job's done. So just any of your flippers out here, if you hire contractors, I would go with the 20, 25, 25, 25, and then 50% rule. Kind of keep you from getting the shaft again. So, but anyway.
Yeah, that's your point about collecting is one that I talk with people a lot, because you're right. And I've told them exactly that. If you win, the judge doesn't make sure that the person is there with their checkbook.
No.
You get a piece of paper, that says you win. Now you've got to go find it.
Yeah, I didn't know that. I didn't know I was going to have to collect on my own after the fact. It was a surprise. So just know that if you ever go to court because you're going to sue somebody, just because you win doesn't mean you get your money in a check that day. It doesn't work like that at all. So,
yeah,
all right,
and Emily makes a point to, if you pay a contractor about getting, if it's not done, you at least getting a partial lien waiver. That's something that makes a lot of sense as well.
Dave, I'm just picturing your response when you get you win and you're waiting for your check to show up in your hand there and it's not coming. I just wish I could see your face that day.
So if we're really gonna be honest, my thought process was, well, if I gotta collect from this guy myself, I could have saved going to court and done it a couple of different ways. So I could hire somebody
Then
else.
you
That would've been a
need,
lawyer
then you
collect
need
for me.
another referral that
Yeah.
I would
Yeah.
have for you. So
Yeah.
Shit, that's funny. Wow. Well, Tom, this was great. I appreciate you spending time with us. We got like 4 minutes left. Does anybody had any last minute other questions or anything? I got several other questions, but we're running out of time. So just seeing if anybody else has any questions before we wrap up.
Alan has a question.
Go
That's
ahead.
more in regards to dispersing. Alan, with that, you just have to like, when you pay from a big box store like Lowe's or Menards or something like that, you just buy the materials up front, and then once they're installed, we allow the dispersing company to pay you back for it. So you just have to provide a receipt. We don't require a lien waiver or anything like that from a big box store for materials or anything like that.
yeah, and I think that's pretty standard. As far, I don't think you're doing anything unusual there as far as asking for the receipt in order to do that.
Very cool. Well, Tom, thanks for taking the time to spend with us today. That was super helpful. We really appreciate it, and especially doing it from your hospital room. I hope Abby's doing well, and I hope she enjoyed the call also.
Yeah, yeah, she's looking a little bored at this point, but that's nothing new. So Dad's talking again, so she's used to that.
All right. Well, that's
Very good.
Well, thanks for everybody. We'll see you guys all next Wednesday at noon. Have a fabulous week.
Bye-bye.
Thank
Bye.
you, Tom.